and it was probably something that she said that like saved my life was, I love my child. I hate parenting. And I was like, oh, I can get behind that, because it's true. I love my child. Love is not enough.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Quick disclaimer. This episode was the first recording I'd ever done, and I didn't know what I was doing. My audio in this interview is not amazing. I promise you, production quality will be on the up and up. You have my word. Bear with me. Laura's words are so worth listening to. Okay, back to the show. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm honored to be joined by Laura Pryor. Laura is passionate about being a conscious parent and bringing awareness and connections to all relationships in her life. Her roles include mother, wife, daughter, and therapist. At her core, she's an imperfect human trying to make the best of this path of life. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So you and I met last summer when you had reached out for parent coaching. And since working together, I feel like I have only gained and learned more from you than you probably have from me.
I don't believe that to be 100% true.
I think so. That's how I'm seeing it. So you have a daughter, correct?
Yes. Mina is 5.5.
Okay. So take us back to your foray into motherhood. And was it all cupcakes and rainbows?
No. So my pregnancy was completely normal. It is the best I've ever felt in my life. My birth of her was a dream. And then probably 2 to 3 weeks after she was born, the proverbial poop hit the fan. She had some stomach issues. She had some acid reflux that she wasn't sleeping like I thought she should be. And my nursing journey with her in the first 6 weeks was really challenging. And so like I basically spent the first year of life just trying to survive motherhood while also now taking care of another human. And how am I supposed to also be able to do my job? So
you were still working at that time.
Yeah, my plan had been to stay home for 6 weeks and then bring my darling daughter to work with me so that she could just nurse and sleep on me the whole time. That didn't
Perfect
happen.
plan. Flawless. Yeah. What could go wrong?
I ended up staying home for 3 to 4 months, which was by choice, and also by necessity. And I think I only brought her to work with me like once or twice, and that's because she was probably like sick. And she was a little bit older, and I knew she could tolerate it. So
there you go. So how did things pan out according to what you had expected? What happened?
I don't want to say nothing. Nothing went the way that I expected. That whole idea of like, the parent I thought I'd be before I actually got pregnant and had a child. One of the things that one of my dear friends that I've known for a long time, and it was probably something that she said that like saved my life was, I love my child. I hate parenting. And I was like, I can get behind that, because it's true. I love my child. love is not enough. When you are a parent, it is absolutely necessary. I love Dr. Shefali, and she talks about how 99% of parenting is about the parent and 1% is about the child. So she has been my great awakener and has, I don't want to say forced because I've chosen it, but to look at all the stuff that I don't want to look at and how am I going to show up in my relationship with her.
Yeah. So how did you come to that awakening? Like, did you know all of that and read all of that work prior to becoming a mom, or was that something that evolved?
So my mom came across Dr. Shefali on Oprah and actually got her first book, which is The Conscious Parent. And I read it while I was pregnant. And I really, really loved it because her work very much is in line with one of, I don't know if you want to call it like a therapeutic technique, DBT, which stands for dialectical behavior therapy. So I was like, oh my gosh, this has so many connections. I can apply this because I'd been doing DBT for so long. And I could really get behind this idea of that parenting, even though it's a bitter pill to swallow, is mostly about us and very little about the child.
And I don't feel like that is common knowledge.
No, definitely the old school, if you will, mentality is, children are to be seen and not heard. They are to be controlled. They are to respect us because we are the adult. That they just need to listen because they just need to listen. Mm-hmm. So absolutely kind of flies in the face of a lot of that stuff that we've been told for a long time and what our parents were told and generations before that.
Right. So if you knew that going into motherhood, how did you assimilate that knowledge when you actually had a baby in front of you?
Well, parenting an infant is like, now I loved one of the things that you sent out in an email a while back that like parenting is best. Like it's best when you're reflecting on it.
In hindsight.
Yeah. Because it sucks in the moment. So, now in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, she was like super easy when she was a baby because it was just like, keep her alive. There wasn't a whole lot of actual like guidance, so to speak, in those times. Whereas now it's, there's a lot more kind of like hands-on.
Mm-hmm. So how has Mina shown you the ugly side of what you've had to address?
So not only is she, I don't know if this may not make sense for a lot of people, but she's an 8 on the Enneagram. And I know you and I have talked about that. And I'm just like, hold me. If you want to start throwing labels that like as a baby, she was high needs, that like she's stage 5 clinger, she's my barnacle baby, Velcro child, like very much like me. And then of course we nursed and did extended nursing, which only, further reinforced that, which I don't regret by any means. And then as she moved into toddlerhood, that like a very, very spirited, willful, stubborn, all of these things that we think about are like the negative labels that we throw on people, not just kids. And so it's like on the one hand in the moment, I can be like, can you just do as I say? Does this have to be like an 8-point argument? Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, when I'm kind of in the moment and beyond it, it's like, okay, she's probably not going to be a follower when she's older. And I'm going to be so grateful for that. But Lord help me right now.
Right? And I don't feel like I have one of those. Every family I've worked with has had at least one that is definitely registering higher on the Richter scale of all of the things and all of the energy, all of the emotions, all of the opinions, all of it.
Intense.
And yes, very intense. But we're not equipped to know what to expect with that or to know how to handle that at all. And that's where I feel like parents really do struggle. And without having tools or perspectives, they start to just kind of grab at what they know and assimilate that with how they were parented or what they've kind of taken from society. And that's not always helpful, especially if it's making them feel a lot of guilt and shame or take a lot of things
Sure.
personally. And so what has that looked like for you?
Well, what I've always told kind of myself and even clients I work with and just in conversations with family and friends is we can't give to others that which we don't possess. And which is why if we don't do the work on ourselves, we will not be able to give our children a different way in how we show up. We can want to do differently than our parents, but because that pattern has been well worn in the brain until we actually do the work, when we're under stress, we're going to go right back to what we know. And it's not a conscious choice that I won't go into all the brain science behind it, but we don't have control over that. It's part of the fight, flight, freeze response.
Yes. And you can speak to that as a therapist, which is why I brought you on, because I feel like that perspective is so valuable to give moms that permission to address that work, but then also take that guilt and shame away that they think that they should just be able to override all these things and consciously do better and then hate themselves every time they don't.
Right, because it's one thing. So we need three things. We need awareness, we need acceptance, and then we can make behavior change. So awareness is just oh, this is my pattern. This is how I'm showing up. Or, oh, this is the narrative I've realized that how I was parented. And this is what I liked about it. And this is what I didn't like. Then we have to accept where we are at. Acceptance just means it is what it is. It's not saying approval, which is saying it's okay or it's not. It just is what it is. Because if we're going to judge something of oh, it shouldn't be that way, well, that's just going to keep us spinning in mud. And then you can start making changes. But then the other trap we fall into, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is how many different parenting books are out there? And there's nuggets in all of them. But I remember when I was my second job out of my master's, I was the family therapist. And because I didn't have kids, and I'm working with kids, I could get the relationship piece, but trying to help the mothers with parenting was challenging because I only had all of these different strategies to rely on. That if I could go back and do that job with the knowledge I have now, it would look very different because I would make them focus or help them focus on building that relationship.
100%. I have the same perspective of going back to my first job and doing home visiting. I was given the curriculum that was very language and literacy based, and the fine motor activities and all of the things and the resources, and it was great, but it was definitely missing that huge component of the personal growth on the parent side and the emphasis on that parent-child relationship. That I can't believe those parents even really listened to me not being a parent.
Right. Well, because that traditional, from whether it be from a strategy point of view or the curriculums they've come out with, or even the parenting styles has been about the child needs to change. So we blame them like they're being naughty or bad or whatever that is. And then there's no accountability for how we are showing up.
Right.
And that's not about judging yourself of oh my gosh, I'm a horrible parent. Because again, that's not going to help you make change. It's one thing to recognize the feeling that's coming up, because I am a horrible parent is not a feeling. Shame is a feeling. But the judgment itself isn't. And that's just going to keep us stuck in it. Yeah.
So what do you feel like would be helpful reflection or, questions or perspective for moms to kind of quote unquote judge their own behavior with? Because, I've really emphasized to the families that I've worked with that we can't control the child's behavior. We can only control our behavior.
Yes.
And, you should be kind of being responsible for having that as your report card of if you want to, have some sort of measurement of success, instead of looking at your child and saying, well, they can now keep it together and be quiet and calm, so that means I'm doing a good job. Instead, it's, at the end of the day, reflecting back and saying, I did what I'm responsible and have control over to, make sure that I'm doing as good of a job as I can be. So what advice do you have for moms?
So I would say the metaphor that has been resonating with me a lot, and I don't know, I'm not going to say this is like spontaneously mine, but it was just one that came to me in the moment last week and I started using it. That like when we show up in our relationships in our daily life, are we going to be a leaf or are we going to be a tree? So that idea that when we are a leaf, we are at the mercy of the weather conditions around us. So that can literally be if it's sunny out or cloudy out, or that could be our child woke up in a good mood, or that could be our partner woke up in a good mood or a bad mood. And then that changes how we show up. So in order for us to feel okay, good, whatever that is, the environment has to be just so.
Mm.
If we are a tree, that we can have confidence in our ability in any given moment and how we are showing up. Doesn't mean we're still not going to struggle, but that idea that like a tree, especially like an oak tree, because like when they get hit with storms, their roots grow even further into the ground. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you've seen pictures of trees in storms where like they're like almost bending to snap and yet they don't. And so it's that idea that when we have, if you will, our internal holes, so HOLES, and we are working on filling those or trying to patch them over, whatever metaphor you want to use, that we have more to give to our kids in particular.
Mm-hmm. So in doing the work, what does that mean? What does that look like?
For like whether it be my journey or what I kind of start doing with the clients that come to me and they are in a place where they are willing to do the work, because let's face it, you show up. I think the general idea is that you go to therapy, your therapist helps you work through whatever current problem is in your life. And then you leave and then maybe you come back the next week. Yes, I still do that in some way, shape, or form, but what I do is, what's your part in this? And they're usually like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Because we want to blame. We want to blame outside instead of reclaim what is our responsibility or on us to have accountability for ourselves, because that's the only person we can control for.
Mm-hmm. Is that usually hard?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely the ones that seem more, and it kind of depends on where they're at, in the process, that are more willing. But a lot of them I get like deer in headlights, which I get because I was the same way when I started diving into this information. So, I mean, I can completely empathize with them. I'm like, look, I understand that this is like easier said than done.
Yeah. And even with all of your background, all of your insight, all of the work that you've done on yourself and the, readings that you have dove into, have you shown up 100% the way that you've hoped to as a mom?
No. And I'm the first to admit, like, oh my gosh, no. But it's not about us showing up perfectly. One,
Mm-hmm.
that perfect and potential, I wish we could wipe out of the human language or just language in general. But like, it doesn't exist. It's not a metric that is realistic, and it's a metric that even if we do find a word for it, it's constantly changing. Kind of like, hashtag pandemic, how we measure productivity needs to change right now for the season of life that we are in. So it's not about, it's not about showing up perfectly. It's about showing up, being attuned, being messy. And, when mistakes happen, because they're going to, apologizing. I started apologizing to my daughter as early as I felt like she could understand. And even probably then she was really too young, quote unquote. But like, because I think every child goes through it, but it's like they hate getting in their car seat. And I used to get so frustrated. And there were days when I would freak out and then I was like, oh my gosh. And, very intentionally apologizing to her and telling her like, it's not okay for anyone to talk to you that way.
Yeah, that's powerful for her to hear.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for moms that feel like they're failing, moms that feel like they have a lot of work to do and, aren't proud of of how they're measuring on the metric of, what their idea is of success in motherhood, which that's a whole nother podcast episode of what success in motherhood has been told to us and how completely impossible it is to meet that standard. But what advice do you have to meet them where they're at and just kind of help them see what next step they could take or what they can really look at and be proud of?
Yeah, because I think you do have to, I don't know if it's a natural human tendency with our brain or if it has to do with like our programming, but we are wired to give more attention and energy over to the things that we are doing wrong. And so we have to be very intentional about, illuminating the things that we are doing well or effective, because that's different based on the family and the culture and the times and everything like that. And so you do need to look for those moments, gratitude, if you will. There's a reason why gratitude works. It rewires the brain. It forces you to scan your environment for things to be grateful for. And you have to choose something different every day. Otherwise, our brains get lazy and they'll loop on the same thing. And so finding those, genuine encounter moments, I don't know if it's Dr. Shefali or someone else, but gems that where you were like, for 10 minutes, I was totally engaged with one of my kids and whatever it was and totally attuned. And that's the really nice thing about attunement and connection is that it is quality over quantity.
So yeah, you could be doing the dishes and have all of your own tasks and things. But then if you took advantage of that 10 minutes with your child and then, went back to life, but you really made the most of those 10 minutes, that's valuable.
Yes, absolutely. And if not, you may or may not at first see the value in it. Your child will out the get-go because it's reinforcing, it's keeping the relationship in the front of our brain. And let's face it, I'm sure you've seen this with your own kids or just in relationships in general, that when you feel like you've got a decent, a good enough connection with someone, you are more likely to receive feedback, be influenced. And that last one, I don't mean like be manipulated, but like kids in general, when they feel connected to you, when you make a request, they're more likely to respond in a helpful way. I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this, because of course they're not going to just be like, yes. And, they're not obedient.
Hypnotized. Yeah.
Right. But like, it's those, if you have enough gems in the day, the hope is that that child feels more connected to where you have a greater influence in the relationship.
And attunement, does that mean that you have to do a craft off of Pinterest together?
No. So Dr. Shefali talks about love your child less and attune to them more. Love, like I said at the outset, love is not enough. Is it needed? Absolutely. Love is also a behavior, just as hatred is. Anger and joy are feelings. But to me, love and hatred, they require action behind them. And so attunement, according to Dr. Shefali, is putting awareness into action. So when your kiddo is like, the lovely 3 to 4 o'clock meltdowns, like, it's a little bit different now, I would imagine, but they've had a long day at school, that they have been, I think the average child receives 2,000 task demands or requests in a day. And so who knows what number they're at that day, depending on what grade level they are in. They're probably hangry. And you know what I mean? So part of attunement is recognizing that they get in the car and they're just out of sorts. And it doesn't mean you like it, you know what I mean? But like, you can give them a little bit more grace of like, yeah, I can tell that this might have been a hard day for them. Or you come prepared with a snack in the car. Not to like, oh, you're upset, here's some food, but more like, hey, you think you might be a little hungry?
Right. And some of the fears that I've been confronted with or been asked when giving that perspective or that suggestion is moms that, want the best for their kids. So they really want to be teaching them in all the right ways. And so they have a misconception or a fear that if they give grace in those moments, that they're reinforcing bad behavior.
Right.
Is that true?
I hear that as well. The a lot of the stuff I see online, which of course, social media gives you the best snippet of humanity at any given point in time, that you have to be hard on them to teach them, that you're going to raise wussies. I'm sorry, but the world is going to chew them up and spit them out. Don't you want to be their safe harbor, the place where that they know that no matter what is happening in their external world, they can come home and know that they are safe and loved and that they matter?
100%. Our gut instinct tells us that. Like in those moments of when we see and we recognize they're struggling, they're asking for help, they need me. But then we sometimes feel that need to override that and say, well, no, I need to hold the bar, or I need to keep them accountable. I need to, address this and make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's what doesn't feel right. And I think the more that we become more attuned to ourselves and what feels instinctively right to us as a mom, then we can make the best decisions for our kids because we know them better than anyone else will.
And I think that process too, in becoming attuned to ourselves, it carries with a lot of trauma, whether it be generational or I don't know if existential is the right word in this, but you know what I mean? That Dr. Shefali talks about how the bulk of parenting is done by age 10. That doesn't mean you stop parenting. It just changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Glennon Doyle talks about how at age 10, we as women start getting indoctrinated into how we are supposed to show up in society as women, as mothers, as wives, as workers, if you will. And so I think that part of becoming in tune with what we feel like gut-wise, like, this doesn't feel right to do this to my child, then we have to start looking at how that was done to us and really peeling back the layers and really possibly grieving our own relationship with our partners, with our parents, with ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's so much more layered than just showing up differently with our kids.
Yes. I feel like that encompasses kind of full circle what we started off talking about how parenting is 99% about us. And that's that magnified where we are really confronted with that deeper level of peeling back the onion of why am I so triggered? Why am I so confused as to what's the next right thing? And yeah, it's not about the 2-year-old's meltdown. It's just that is the biggest catalyst to making us confronted in the first place.
That is the current manifestation of a trigger that was already there. Because a trigger is a trigger because it's already there. That like,
right.
Like I when I work with clients, I'm like, okay, if somebody told you, like they were like, ugh, you're like a really bad baker and you're not, you're going to be like, what? But if somebody says something to you, like questioning your parenting, you're going to be like, oh, wait, maybe is that right? Because that insecurity was already there. Somebody cannot make us feel something that we don't already feel, whether we're aware of it or not.
Oof.
Yeah,
that's deep.
Bitter pills to swallow.
Yes. Now you're making me feel like I'm failing more. No.
Well, and here's the thing, like, yes, fail. Do you know what I mean? Like, what does we have as a society? It's the judgment we have about the word failing. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what like the Webster's dictionary, version of failing is, but if we just took it at face value, there's no emotion feeling in the definition of failure. It's the judgment, the perception we have about it, the stuff that we vomit onto it that makes it like kind of punch us in the gut.
Yeah. It's the ways that we compare ourselves to the mom next door and our perception of her and what we feel like she's doing better at than we are, or, you know, what we've been told by our mom that we should be living up to, or, yeah, all of the other things that we pile on top of that.
And again, that layering, that like, guess what? You think over your lifetime and you think about like when maybe you feel like your life has been easier and when you think it's been harder. And we need kind of the easy times in life because basically it's our respite from being a human being. And because, it's full of pain. I mean, and nobody walking around today is fine. I don't even know what that means. It's only in the times when it's been hard that we truly, truly learn. Why? Because we made mistakes. Mistakes just means you're learning.
Yes. Growth mindset for motherhood.
Yes. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what we want to teach our kids, is that idea that failure is a part of success and that mistakes are okay. And that is how we learn. And we haven't mastered that skill yet, the power of yet. And like, that's still a new concept, I feel like, to not only parenting, but to how that even translates to us.
Yeah.
So if we could teach growth mindset to moms, are there any like takeaways that you feel like would be good for them to start applying that?
Well, just looking for the teachable moments. Do you know what I mean? Not only with your child, but with yourself too. That you can ask yourself, which I realize, in the moment it can be hard to do. But here's the thing. When your child is having a conniption fit, what's going on in the environment? I mean, unless it's like seriously a life or death situation, we don't have to respond as if it is. We can take a deep breath. We can just give space to the child's tantrum. I realize if they're like hitting someone and hurting someone or, trying to run out into the street, that different situation.
Yeah.
We don't have to respond as if there's a 4-alarm fire. Because if we don't take care of ourselves first, and then we go in and the child sees that, you know what I mean, we're all worked up, it's just going to escalate them.
Right.
Sometimes, I know there was many times when Mina would have tantrums and even now where I'm like, I have no idea what to do. So you know what? I'm just going to see if I can give her a hug. And now that she's a little bit older, she's a little bit more resistant at first, but eventually she will come in. And then I just don't even say anything because whether it be a child, even an adult, but so, okay, going back to the brain a little bit, adult brain is not fully developed until about 27, 28. And that means that the prefrontal cortex is not fully online. And that is kind of what helps control emotional dysregulation, impulsivity, things like that. When a child has literally flipped their lid, that means that right now they are in their amygdala and they are in a fight, flight, freeze response. That you trying to do any sort of redirection, discipline, or punishment, or even lecturing at them, they don't hear any of it. Your only goal is to connect before you redirect. I think that's Dr. Laura Markham. But until they have calmed down, and generally it takes the brain about 20 to 30 minutes to do so, it's not going to be a teachable moment or a learning situation.
Yeah. So knowing that, it gives moms permission to not have the perfect secret formula, strategy thing that's going to make or break that moment and put all that pressure on themselves to, okay, I gotta, be super perfect in this moment so that I can mitigate this as quickly as possible.
Right. Because really what that comes down to, it comes from our own place of fear of like, I don't like what's happening. And we're not sitting with our own feeling about seeing our child struggle.
Oof, yes. So true.
That's hard. Trust me. I get there. I mean, there's times where, Mina's starting and I can sense it. I'm like, oh God, here we go. I mean, I don't say it out loud, but then I'm like, okay, just breathe. Like, don't join her storm.
Yes. So everyone can now see why I learned more from you than...
We are all learning together for sure.
Yes. You're so wise. You have so much perspective because I can just tell that you're so passionate about this. You've done your research and continue to do your research because it matters to you and it matters to your work and it matters to your relationship with Mina and how you continue to, grow and evolve as a mom every day. I feel like we can't, judge ourselves based on comparing ourselves to another mom, but we can challenge ourselves to show up better today than we did yesterday.
Yes. And I mean, the only reason, I don't know if it's only, the biggest motivation behind all of this work has been because I had a child. I don't know if I would have done this amount of work had it not been for her. Do you know what I mean? So like this gift that she's given me that I am now able to pass on to others and, take what you want, leave the rest. I'm not responsible for what, you know what I mean, what resonates with you and what you're like, well, that's hooey. Because like I said, it's a bitter pill to swallow. In that fashion, I attribute that to her being in my life.
Yeah, we can thank our kids. I thank my second daughter for teaching me most of what I know to help parents because my first was relatively by the book. And so I was like, all right, everything that worked in a classroom is working for her. So this is great. I am an A+ parent. And then the second one came around and threw all of that in the trash.
Yep.
And that's where I've really had to choose to go on that journey with her and realize that I didn't know everything I thought I knew. And, I make this joke all the time, but you don't come to a place of full enlightenment and, arriving as a grown-up, and then you're allowed to have a child and teach them. It's actually the total opposite. Like they walk into your life and then you're invited to grow and evolve and come to a better understanding.
Yep.
So what books or resources do you recommend?
So, well, right now it's really cool. I know I've name dropped Dr. Shefali how many times in here, but she really, she's got 3 different books right now, and then she's got one she just released with Rainey Jane, and it's like how to get super powered, and it's walking parents through the teenage years with kids who have really high anxiety and quite frankly what child walking around today because of social media doesn't. I haven't gotten that one yet, but so her 3 books are wonderful. She has multiple online courses that are all 50% off right now. I actually just joined her group called Luminous, and it's for women in general, and it's just women being women. It's not showing up in the roles. So I think it's kind of more about that path versus coming into motherhood or parenting. And then she has been posting daily videos on YouTube, and they started on April 10th. So she's been doing them daily in regards to the pandemic. She doesn't focus on the pandemic, but she uses it as the current manifestation of all the crap that we've been trying to run away from and now staring us square in the face. So I would say she's the one I get the bulk of my information from. And then Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson, they have co-authored 3 books together. So The Whole Brain Child, The Yes Brain, and then their latest one, which is The Power of Presence or Showing Up. That one's really, really good. All 3 of those books are my favorite, are really good, but I think the last one is my favorite. Maybe that's because it's the one I most recently read. Brene Brown and all of her work on shame is very applicable. And she's got a wonderful podcast right now. So if you're not familiar with Brene and you don't like to read or you don't feel like you have time to, the podcast starts to give you a little like toe in the water to what her work is.
Well, I love the people that are showing up for us right now because it is an unprecedented time where we are being confronted with a lot of the stuff that we were running from, and you don't have all of the busy things to keep us occupied and keep our brain focused on other things. And so we're spending a lot more time with our kids, and that's showing us some beautiful aspects of that. And it's also showing a lot of ugly things that are, forcing us to maybe level up, or know that we need to show up a little bit differently or need more perspective. So now's a beautiful time to double down and choose what we're investing in, what we're paying attention to, and say yes to that invitation to learn and grow.
Right. Because here's the thing. I fully believe this, and you can kind of insert whatever phrase resonates most with you. If we do not learn the lesson now, the universe will give us another opportunity to learn it. So you can either do it now, right? Or you can do it later. It never fails.
That's really good perspective. Because I think a lot of the times too, when strangers ask for parenting advice online, they just say like, 3 is hard, but it gets better by 4. Oh, they just need to learn, or they're just, it's just a phase. And then, you just kind of have to barrel through it, put your head down. And I challenge that because 1, that's not how people actually learn. And 2, if 99% of that interaction is coming from our side of it, then if we just continue to do the same thing over and over and over, hoping for a different result in their behavior, it's just not going to come.
Yeah, because if we are blaming them, like, oh, you haven't gotten this yet. Stop blaming, start reclaiming.
Ooh, I love it. Okay, so that's a good note to end on. The last question that I'm going to ask every mom that I bring on is, how are you the perfect mom for your daughter?
I'm not. I feel like, because I get where you're going. I hate the word perfect, but I get it.
A good mat, chemically,
yes,
all of the things.
Yes. I'm good enough. I am willing to look at myself, even when I don't like it. And cultivating I feel like 2 of my biggest strengths are empathy and curiosity, which I feel like the world just in general needs more of. And I don't know if that's just because that's innately part of who I am, being a 3 on the Enneagram, or if it's just because I've leaned into the brain or the pain it creates in my brain that now I just ignore it. That I am good enough for her. I am constantly willing and open to learning more. I fully believe I don't know everything.
And that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much for all of the time today, Laura.
Thank you
for all the wisdom and advice and perspective and vulnerability. We have learned a lot in this short episode. So I think podcast over. Just one episode. Call it good.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.
You made it. What'd you think? I hope you heard the one thing that you needed to hear today. Next episode, we'll hear from one of my good friends opening up about how she really believed she wasn't a natural mother and how that devastated her for too long. I hope every single episode serves you, supports you, and encourages you. Please subscribe on iTunes, write a review, and tell a friend. These are the ways we spread the love so another mama doesn't feel so alone. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. You are the mom your kids need. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.